Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Forward Thinking Podcast. It's Christy and Charlie here from CS2. And today, it's just going to be the two of us, and we're going to be chatting about, I think, a topic that we've been thinking about a while. Like, I think
10 years? Well, actually, no.
no, just
2 years.
recently. I think, and that's why is marketing ops feel like it's getting so hard? And just revenue operations, I'll probably clue into that too, but definitely marketing operations. And so we're going to talk about why we feel that way, or maybe we think what the reason is for that.
Yeah, and we hear from a lot of people. We speak to a lot of people, our clients, people in our network, people in marketing operations, seeing stuff online on LinkedIn, and it just gets exponentially harder. And I think I remember about a year ago, I posted that. I can't remember if it was a GIF or just a meme. I think it might have been a GIF with like all of. Oh no, it was a podcast video with all of the different things like people in marketing operations have to do, and like really hit home for a lot of people just how it's just getting exponentially harder. And I think we've figured out one big reason why that is,
Yeah.
why it feels like it just gets harder and harder every year.
Yeah. So what is it?
Well, a lot of it, in our opinion, is centered around time.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone knows, there's a lot that just accumulates. There's a lot of technical debt that accumulates from companies moving too fast. There's a lot of processes that accumulate, tech that accumulates. And we're going to go into each of these things in a little bit more detail, but it's just the accumulation of all of that stuff that just makes it harder and harder and harder to do anything else. So like the more you have, the harder it is to do the next thing. Like you want to create a process for your field marketing team. There's more you have to think about, there's more you have to audit, there's more you have to take into account. You want to set up a new tool for your demand gen team. There's more you have to think about, there's more you have to audit, it just takes a lot longer to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that you mentioned just before we even got on this is that the team sizes haven't grown.
No.
But the time it takes to do everything. And we're not even in this respect, we're not particularly even talking about the amount of things we have to do, because that is also exponentially grown.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just the time it takes to do
Mm-hmm.
things is also exponentially growing, given the growing amount of things that we need to do. It's just like this compounding effect that just is getting out of control.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the things where I think we got focused on time, because I was comparing to when we first got started in marketing operations, and I feel like, I'm doing a lot of the same things that, I'm seeing a lot of companies wanting to do the same things that we did like 10 years ago, but the route to get there just seems much tougher, more strenuous, and then I just thought, oh, it's just been time for like, and so we're gonna, a lot of like what Charlie said is just focus around what's been happening in like 11, 12, 13 years that impacts that. So the first one is, and I think it's one of the biggest one, is just technical debt. So I think, a long time ago, there was, Salesforce instances that didn't have much automation in it. You maybe had like a few workflows, but like that was it really, I think. And then that's all you're really limited to as well. So I think part of this too has to do with just the technology evolving and how much you could do with it and how much has been stuck there. But without this general sense of like, what's best practice, or let's go back and review all those things that we did and get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because for most growing companies, they're not going to give you that time to do that. So technical debt is just our biggest, is marketing operations and sales operations like arch nemesis, I would say.
Yeah, and it just layers on and on and on as people are moving too fast. They're doing things, they're not documenting anything, and it just gets, these systems just get almost unmanageable.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point, we talked about this before, where the time it will take to pay down your debt is more time than you have if that was the only thing you were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the debt can only accumulate. It's kind of like if the interest on your loan was all of your paycheck, right? And then therefore you'll never pay down your loan. you're always just paying off the interest. I think it's got to that point, or maybe even worse, where the interest on your loan is more than your paycheck, right? So you can barely even make the interest payments on your debt.
Yeah.
So that just, like we mentioned before, it just makes everything incredibly tough to work around. And then you think you're implementing something right. And I think this has always been a degree of this in marketing ops, but you will implement something and then you've always had to go into like a maintenance phase and a monitoring phase
Yeah.
in what we do. But this nowadays, that is like one of the most important pieces. You kind of always have to ship and then know there's going to be like extra releases like very quickly after that to account for all of the things that you didn't really have time to audit, because this is probably consistent across every industry, but especially ours with these fast-paced B2B tech companies. They don't want to wait 3 months to do a full technology process system automation audit to be able to account for everything. It's like, let's get everything we kind of know, let's get a good job done, and then something comes up, we will address that after that. And that's like the quickest way to get it done, but often not it's arguable which way is best. But that's kind of the world that we live in, and it's impossible to really know absolutely everything, especially like you said in Salesforce. And I think that's Salesforce is a big culprit of this, right? There's a lot of automation in there, Apex, and there's a lot of it's very hard to unpack. So you do often find a lot after you've implemented, and that's why it feels like it's harder.
Yeah, and I will say that Salesforce isn't the only tool, in market automation. We've done audits and we still do them. And we think that if anything, before going to a big project, there is some level of auditing you need to do, because even for us, right, we're experts. We go in, we think something's going to take a certain amount of time, and you find, some stuff there that needs to be removed or could heavily impact the performance of what you're building. And so I think for everyone that's listening, okay, yes, we know about technical debt, but I think the thing that we need to realize is, how can we build a case for addressing this? Because then you're just adding on more. And then to like communicate that, right? Like, so change the expectations. And I will say, we're learning this too, for talking to the client. How long is this going to take? Well, actually, we need to keep in mind that it might take, double the time than what it used to for us before. And so really keep that in mind as you're setting expectations with your team, your leadership team, knowing all of that. And I think many of us have learned that. But
yeah, and that was a key point of my post in the newsletter last week, is that what we're talking about, it's kind of interesting to talk about it, but the reason why we're talking about it is because everyone in marketing ops needs to be better at voicing this.
yes.
Like, we often want to be the hero, get things done quickly, like kind of make it happen. And that's great. Like, don't lose that part of you. But at the same time, we have to be very realistic and set expectations properly. It's much better if you say something's going to take 3 months and it takes 2 than say it's going to take a month and it takes 2. So we need to be better at managing that expectation and knowing that there's a lot that we don't know, and that's going to come out, and it's going to potentially slow things down, and it's going to be a lot of stuff we have to account for. But then one of the other things to move on, other than technical debt, and this they all feed into each other. But one other thing that's happened over the last 10 years is that marketing operations tenure for marketing people, it's like a year, 18 months. We did that survey a while back. It's not very long. So if you think someone who implemented, Marketo in their Salesforce instance 10 years ago, they may have had 6, 7 owners of that platform to now.
Yeah.
So they implemented in 2010, we're now 21. They might have had that many owners. Now, with the obvious issues with lack of documentation, right? People come in, they build on top of a shaky foundation because they didn't really know what was there, and they didn't have time to audit it. And then they leave, and then the other person comes in and builds, and they leave. And that historical knowledge and the kind of understanding of how all these pieces are like being built on top of each other and not really built accounting for each other, that's just going to create even more problems, right? And like the more that happens and the longer that happens, the harder things get again.
Yeah. And I think on the people side, there's turnover. And then because of the turnover and because we're just reliant on people that fell into this role over the last 10 years. And a lot of people that started marketing operations, they want to grow into a leadership role. So the amount of people that actually are in roles that wanted, they're doing the work is getting like shrinking. We need that to boost. And we talked about this on past podcasts, but the amount of people, even though things have gotten more complex, there's more to do, there's more tech to manage, the amount of people on our teams has stayed the same, or even in some cases reduced. When I first started my career, we got to, as a small startup, I was lucky because we valued market automation at Marketo, but we had a team of like 4 or like even 5 almost at one point. Now you're lucky if you have 2, more than just one person. And so that's tough. Like there's just so much that we're expected to do. And then we wonder why there's high turnover. And we know that this is a tricky one. It's hard to hire. How can we hire more? We're trying to hire more. And I think that companies need to be realistic. If you can't hire more, it just means you need to prioritize more and you maybe need to slow down. And that might mean that you need to sacrifice in certain areas. It doesn't mean like it's going to stop. Your business isn't going to stop. It just means you need to just have different expectations.
Yep, totally. And then an additional point, we kind of touched on this as well, is the accumulation of tech and processes, even if it's been well built, right? So like, we've talked about technical debt and like things being built without accounting for things and documentation. That's but things maybe not built in the best way. And then the turnover kind of compounding on that. But even well integrated tools, built process, like it's still more stuff to think about. There's more stuff to own and manage, right? Like, we speak to a lot of clients and they have all the tools, right? Every tool in every category, a couple of people to manage them. And a lot of these, even if they're not being 100% used and they're kind of shelfware, they still seem to stick around for a lot longer than they should.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, but then they're adding on, new and the tools that aren't shelfware, the ones they're even using. So you've got like a lot of tech that you're just like managing and just keeping the lights on. You have a lot of tech that you're really pushing and trying to like get the maximum ROI out of it. But like that list is just growing and growing and growing. That's why there's tools out there just to help you manage like documenting your tech stack. It's like, but back in the day when we first started, it was kind of like, oh, you had Marketo, you had Salesforce, maybe had like a couple of other things,
like a plugin or something.
Now it's like you literally have, sometimes we documented the clients 30 or more different tools. Each one of those tools comes with their own special little things that you need to be aware of. That's a lot of memory. Like I always talk about like internally for us, like when we talk about client ratios to our team, there's a certain amount of memory, like a kind of a computer memory that you have to store to be able to understand like, okay, this is how everything is set up in all of these clients. And there's a maximum amount of memory that you have. Same thing, even for an internal person. You've got to try and remember how all this stuff is set up because you don't have like perfect documentation on everything. The more that grows, the harder it is for you to remember all of those things. So when you plug in this new tool, that syncs and updates some one field you didn't know was like super reliant upon or super necessary for like some other tool that you kind of forgotten about. And now you're getting like sync errors and you're scrambling, wondering why sales is messaging you and like because they're not getting the data that they need or something, they're getting weird alerts or something. And that again is just it's just too hard to manage that exponentially growing amount of things.
Totally. I think for anyone who is watching video and not just listening, I kind of look like I'm about to laugh, but the whole time I keep thinking. The other night I was just saying to Charlie, you know how people think that technology is going to take our jobs? I wish that we were getting close to that point, because if these technologies really ran on their own or replace some of our jobs, we would not be feeling this way. And so if anything, we're not even close, right? All these tools and technologies need an owner and they don't run themselves. And so I think everyone in marketing ops that thinks their job's going to be obsolete one day, yes, maybe very, very far down the line, but not
Well, the
Not
good thing
soon.
about marketing ops, and I've said this before, is that we're the one controlling
Controlling
the
them.
tech. So like
Mhm.
that will be the last job, for them, you know,
Yeah.
like once they've taken everyone at every sales job, every marketing job, the person running the tech eventually will hang on, and then soon maybe we'll all like in about 50 years have taken everyone's jobs, but
Yeah.
we'll be the last one to go, I think.
So I think, I mean, this comes down to like, there's more tech, more process fields, validation, syncs. We talked about that. But what can we do to maybe make this feel less hard? I think we're still learning, right?
A lot of it comes down to communication and being very, very open with the business about how difficult things can be, and not in a complainy way,
No.
or not in a way also that makes it seem like you're not fit for the job, right? Like it's not that
Yeah.
you can't do this. It's like technically, like you don't have the, it's not like you don't have the skill set. It's just like it's a kind of an impossible job when
Yeah.
you have this an intense amount of demand on you through because of all of these factors. So I think communicating that, and then trying to pay down some of that
Mhm.
technical debt, try and like simplify things, try and make things easier to manage, try and get rid of shelfware, try and be very um try and not like just add tools because
Mhm.
for the fun of it, and make sure you build the proper business case. So it's all around just like having the right mindset and being better at communicating, really. But that isn't going to be a silver bullet. You're not going to solve this in a week, right? This is going to be like a lifelong journey, and I don't know if you'll ever truly solve it, but I think we have to start acknowledging this problem, that it is getting harder and harder and harder to do this because of these factors, and then we have to try and at least make it easier in
Mhm.
any way that we can, because it probably will only get harder, but we don't want it to keep exponentially getting harder. Let's kind of like keep it going at like a slower pace.
Totally. And I think my last piece of advice, and this is even for people who aren't in MOPS who are listening, but as much as we can, simplify when we can. And simple doesn't mean not sophisticated. Kind of like with dressing, like the more you put on doesn't mean like the better it looks. Like just we can trim things down if we can. Or if someone comes to you with some crazy like routing rules and stuff like that, okay, that makes sense. But I actually think it could be a bit simpler, or the longevity of this, or if it actually working could be better. Just really communicating with the team, because they don't know. They just think, oh, I came up with this idea, just go and execute it. But that doesn't mean that needs to be the last straw. So
Totally.
just another thing for as far as like adding on to that communication path. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this. If you have any comments on why it's so hard, at me and Charlie on LinkedIn, or send us a note. And we hope you enjoy this episode of Forward Thinking, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.